Hello and a very warm welcome back to my channel. So in the last video I talked about how to optimize how you come across when you speak, present or communicate online in the virtual space. A lot of it comes back to what we can see and what we can hear. In this video I'm going to talk to you about the visual aspect. So not only what are you looking at, but what are your audience seeing when they watch you. All right. Now, a quick story before I start. You'll all remember March 2020. It's probably going to be in our heads for a very long time. It's a generational thing where we all went through the pandemic, COVID-19. The reason I bring that up is quite simply this. We had a lot of people on TV and on radio talking to us about how to stay safe, how to safeguard ourselves, and so on and so forth. Medical practitioners, doctors, that kind of healthcare industry people coming on TV and giving us some tips and hints on how to stay safe. What struck me though, on the BBC, which is one of our major channels here in the UK, was these doctors, although very good at what they did, weren't necessarily very good communicators. And by that, I mean that when they were interviewed by the journalist on the BBC, as an example, they were given advice in the best way they thought they should give it. And that advice was usually when they had a laptop in front of them, generally on a coffee table or table of some description, and they were looking down at the laptop. Why wouldn't they? Because normally when you work on a laptop, it's at table height or maybe lower on a coffee table, and you'd be typing away, looking at the screen and typing away. So by default, those laptops stayed in the same position when they were giving a live broadcast to the BBC. And what struck me was the number of people, medical practitioners and doctors and GPs, who are superb at what they do, of course, didn't necessarily have the skills to speak in an optimal way in a virtual environment. So there were typically, and lots of people were doing this, had their laptops at a lower height, looking down at the laptop. And I'm doing it now, so you can see the top of my head, but more importantly, when they were doing that, what was really odd, because they were looking down and the camera was looking up at them, you got some very difficult things to look at. For example, you could see the inside of their nose, which I know is not very nice to hear, and almost the inside of the top of their mouth. Why? Because the camera was positioned so low that it was looking up. So you had all the double chin thing going on, looking up their nostril hairs. It's not a great look. So we learned very quickly to raise the camera to eye level to make sure that you could communicate in a way that you would normally do when you're either standing with a group or seated and everybody's at the same height. So that's as an aside. What I'm going to focus on today is why eye contact is so important. We all know that instinctively, from a very young age. I'm sure most of you heard a variation of this from your parents, your guardians, your grandparents. Look at me when I'm talking to you. A lot of people have heard that, I'm sure. It's good advice. If I suddenly started to talk over there when I'm actually trying to connect with you over here, it would feel really strange to you. Or what you see quite often, people looking at the laptop or worse at the keyboard, when really you should be looking up at the camera so you can connect with people eye to eye, as it were. Now, but how do we do that? It is difficult. I'm not going to lie to you. It is difficult because in a professional environment, when you've got slides to share and you have documents to share, or maybe you've got a virtual whiteboard that you're working with in a meeting, a corporate meeting with other business users in a transversal organization and or a matrix organization where people are all around the world at different time zones, at different bandwidths and internet speeds, it becomes tricky. So you do have to, from time to time, look down, check what you're doing on the screen and then look back up. Now, I've heard people say you need to look at the camera lens as much as 99% of the time. Honestly, I think that's impossible. 99% of the time is not feasible. Just simply by virtue of the fact from time to time, you're going to have to glance down and look at the stuff that you're sharing with your audience. And that could just be, as I said, a video, your slides, your notes, maybe sharing a whiteboard. It's impossible to look at both at the same time. I'm trying to do it now. It's impossible and it'll drive you nuts. So I would give you as a rule of thumb, 80-20. Good old Pareto's principle. Look at the lens, 80% of the time. So the vast majority of the time, your audience thinks you're looking at them, or the perception is that you're looking at them. When in actual fact, as you know, you're looking at a cold, hard, dark lens. We'll come on to how to make that easier in a moment. 20% of the time, yes, for sure. You need to type something in the chat box. You need to share the screen. You need to look at your virtual whiteboard. Whatever else you need to do to make sure that meeting is not rich only in content, but also in interaction. What's happening? So let's have a look at the other camera and go through some bits and pieces on how to make this easier. Whether you're on a laptop, your phone, or a webcam, how do we look at the camera? How are we perceived when we're on the other side of the camera? Let's do that right now. So obviously this is all about your eyes. And one of the things that I wanted to focus on is what kind of device are you using? And this includes tablets and phones, because a lot of people are speaking, having meetings on different kinds of devices these days, not only laptops. So let's have a look at a typical laptop. Something like this, which I'm sure you'll all recognize, and is your pad there. Now this is your screen. Here's your keyboard, and most people, most of the time, will look at the screen. Now when you look at the screen, I'm now looking at the lens, but when I look at the screen, it's very subtle, but you can see the difference. I'm now looking at the screen, not at you. Worst case, I'm even typing away. Now that's okay, as I said, for that 20% of the time. But do not look at the screen and or the keyboard for 80% of the time, because then you really will lose the connection with your audience. So from the laptop's perspective, try to always, generally speaking, the lens in the top, in the middle. Try to look at the lens. I would also suggest, as we mentioned earlier with the doctors when we had the pandemic, to increase the height of the laptop, at least by 10, 12 inches, something like that. A good shoebox will do. Any old shoebox, lift the laptop up. If you haven't got shoebox, use 5 or 6 thick books. Increase the height of the laptop generally so the lens gets higher, so they're not looking up your nose, they're looking at you eye to eye. That's on a laptop. Now, of course, a lot of us these days are using webcams. You can see a webcam with its little connection to the tripod. Webcams, the same sort of thing. Now, because they're so small, we tend to think, oh, it's quite small, I need to just look in the region of the webcam. No, the same principle applies. Look at the red dot. That's your lens, right bang in the middle of the lens. Look there, not above, not below. Look at the red dot on this picture, i.e. the lens on your camera. Here, it's the laptop, generally center at the top is where you'll find it. Now, the tricky one is on some kind of device, which is either your phone or a tablet. Now, let's do them in two different ways. So first of all, we've got a typical phone or tablet. This is landscape, of course. And if it's landscape, depending on which way you're holding it up, the camera aperture, the lens, will be on one side or the other. Now, what I see most people do when they're using a phone in landscape is they're looking at the middle of the screen, not the lens. Now, this is a normal camera. So if I look slightly to the left, I'm doing it now, or slightly to the right, I'm doing it now, I'm not looking directly at the lens. It's subtle, but it makes a difference. So if your phone is in landscape, make sure you're looking at one side of it or the other, which is where the lens is. Of course, it's much easier when your phone is in portrait style. Typically speaking, the camera's at the top. It's very easy to look at the lens. Again, don't look at the screen, look at the lens. So if your eyes drift a little bit lower to see yourself or the audience, try to pick it back up and look at the actual lens. So those are little tips in terms of where to be looking on your laptop. Remember to increase the height of the laptop so you've got it at eye level. Same with the webcam and same with the phones, whichever style you want to put it, either landscape or portrait. Now, I've got a couple of these. You'll have seen these on Amazon or different places, electronic shops. These are a very basic little piece of equipment. A little tripod. I like this bendy one because you can put it anywhere. Don't have to have it. I tend to do interviews and presentations all over the place, so these little bendy things work really well. And of course, you can turn it into landscape or portrait. This one works well in different places. And of course, I've got a much bigger one, which can be up to sort of almost 2 meters high. Same thing, if I'm standing, I can use it either in landscape or portrait as well. So these things are really, really useful. Try to start to build up your equipment if you haven't already got some, because this stuff makes a difference when you come to be live on some kind of meeting or presentation. It's how much effort you've put into it. So that's the basics. Now let's have a look at your positioning in the frame. In other words, what are other people seeing when you're presenting? Yes, you're doing the right thing by looking at the lens, but where are you positioned? In other words, let's talk about framing. And I'll put 3 up here. I know I'm not looking at the lens, but I'm just drawing this. This, by the way, is part of my 20% not looking at the lens. So I'm obviously working and interacting with the flip chart. And that's why I say looking at the lens 99% of the time is just not possible, is just not feasible. Because from time to time, particularly if you're using either a virtual whiteboard or a real whiteboard stroke flip chart, you have to look at what you're doing. What I'm saying is, vast majority of the time, 80% of the time, look at the lens. So this is framing. Now, you will know when you're at a social occasion or a party or even in business, and people come right up to you, in other words, invading your personal space. I don't even want to do it here because I know it's going to feel awkward for you. If they're invading your personal space in a real live face-to-face meeting, you get that feeling that, whoa, back off, you're in my personal space. That is when you're too close to the lens. This is you. And you're too close to the lens. So all they see on their screen is that. Not a great sight. The opposite to that is if you're too far from the lens, your voice won't carry. That's another problem. We'll come on to that in another video. But if you're too far from the lens, you might just be this little figure right at the bottom of the picture. So you've got this silhouette. If the lighting's not good, it will be particularly bad. And now they can't see all of you. They can see a sort of head and shoulder shot, but you're so small in the lens that they can't make out your facial features or the gestures, the little minute gestures that you have to communicate with people, like I'm doing now, smiling, raising your eyebrows, raising your cheekbone, whatever it might be. We can't see it. And because we can't see it, you have this feeling of not truly having that connection. This one, you're too close to the lens, they're feeling uncomfortable and they're going to back off metaphorically. They might even do it physically, even in the virtual world, because you're too close to them. So the kind of ideal situation is here. So they can see you, and they can see you well, they can see your facial gestures, and you could even start to gesture in this space appropriately, according to the framing that you've got. You can gesture appropriately like I'm doing now. You can still see the edge of my hands. I'm not too close. I'm not too far. I'm sort of, little teddy bear in the middle, quite happy. We can all agree that having this sort of spacing is much more comfortable for the viewer. So what I would put here, just as a visual, is probably this is the correct way to be. And I would certainly not advocate this or this. So think about your framing. First of all, where are you looking in terms of your eye contact? Remember, if you're looking at somebody, they feel that connection. So make sure you're looking at the red dot, whichever format you're using. And then in the framing, have a look at yourself when you start the meeting. On most platforms, Zoom, Teams, WebEx, you can start the meeting early or indeed start another meeting. Make sure your positioning is right. Think about how far you are from the lens. If you have to, put some stickies on the floor, some sellotape or some tape or some description so you know where to plant your feet. And if you can't do that, make sure you've got a rough estimate of how far you could be from the camera to make sure you don't get this, but you do have somewhere this kind of look. Now, when you're looking at the lens, So let's go back to this one. Some people tell me and share this with me, say, it's really tough to look at this little cold, hard lens. I can't do it all the time. It's kind of distracting. Well, one of the things you can do, and one of the things I do, and I teach all my participants to do, is just draw a set of eyes. Now, if you draw a set of eyes and stick that behind the lens, this is just a 5-second drawing, not even. You've got a target. Now, it could be small, it could be big, it doesn't matter. The fact is, if it's behind the lens, you're simulating a pair of eyes. Now I've got a target to look at. If you don't want a pair of eyes, as I said in the last video, maybe draw Brad Pitt or Angelina Jolie or one of your loved ones and put them behind the lens. So you've now got an object, a person, some kind of target to look at behind the lens. Or favorite pet, it doesn't matter. Then you know that you've got something to look at and where to look at, rather than off to the side, up to the top, or down to the bottom. The other thing I do a lot when I'm talking to an audience, particularly if sort of the management committee or the C-level suite or very senior managers, I tend to get their pictures. And it tends to be from LinkedIn or any one of these public domains where you're more than happy to basically pick up a picture. I tend to do that, and I will basically very quickly have a look at that or that, and I will simply take their pictures, put their names underneath the pictures, and I'll have them behind each camera. We've got 3 cameras going on in here, so it depends on what I'm doing and how I'm teaching. I will have their pictures very close by, either below the lens or off to the side. So when somebody has a question and or a comment, I can see the person. So they're not just face on a screen. I get to know them better, because in some instances, unless you've got multiple screens in the right places, you can't always see them. So I like to know and associate the name with the face wherever I'm looking. So I will go to that effort. And sometimes if you're really nervous or anxious about a particular presentation, take a look at the person's face before you get to the presentation, particularly if it's an external meeting and you don't know an awful lot about them. Get their name, get their title, what kind of history they've got. All of this is available on LinkedIn, and then take their picture, print it out, and get used to looking at them. That way, when they're on screen and you're looking at them at the screen, it doesn't feel so awkward or so difficult, and you're much more familiar with them. And if their name is underneath it, Zoom, Teams, WebEx, you can't really see the names, they're very small. If you've got it print out and you've familiarized yourself with your audience, you can see them very clearly then, both on the printout and on the screen, and you can associate their name with that picture. So that's with your eyes. What do you do? This is where do you frame yourself? Okay. Finally, what I like to call your light. Now we've got several light sources in here. That light is really important. Remember, it's not only what you're looking at, in this case the lens, the perception of your audience looking at you makes a big difference. So if for whatever reason I suddenly turn the lights off in here, the perception you'd have of me is very, very different. So let's try that now. So this is me now with the lights off, at least some of them. There's one little light over there in the corner. But the difference is quite remarkable. Now I'm kind of grainy, I don't look so good, the shadows are coming from different angles. Doesn't necessarily look as good as it could be. So remember, lighting, you don't want to be this silhouette. Also, you don't want to be like somebody that you can't read their facial features, because that makes such a big difference, particularly in this virtual world where really we only have 2 dimensions, what we can see and what we can listen to. So lighting, be aware of it. If you don't have any professional lighting, just get a lampshade, and just putting that on in behind the lens will make a big difference to the light on your face. So we're back to the main camera. So just as a recap, your eyes are really, really important, particularly in the virtual space where we only have 2 dimensions, as I mentioned earlier. So your eyes, remember, the lens is what you need to look at, whether you have a webcam, a laptop, a phone, a tablet, landscape or portrait. Think about it carefully. Where are you looking? 80% of the time, look at the lens. If you're looking at the screen and or the keyboard, remember that you're not making eye contact. Don't worry so much. The 20%, as I say, 15-20% of the time, Nobody's expecting you to look at the lens 99% of the time, which I have heard before. I think that's not only impossible, I don't think it's realistic at all, because even your audience will expect you to look down from time to time. 99% of the time, looking at the lens is impossible. More than that, if you're in a real room with people next to you, 15, 20 people in a sort of smallish meeting, or 5 or 6 people in a small team meeting, you're not going to be looking at them 99% of the time. That would feel uncomfortable and a little bit weird, honestly. So you need to share where you're looking. We'll come on to that in a moment. Positioning. Remember, too far, you need to watch where I'm standing, too far, and, especially with poor lighting, you could just be this small speck in the background of the frame. Too close, and it feels uncomfortable. I'm in your personal space. So remember framing. And finally, of course, if you've got a set of eyes, you want to draw them, put them behind the camera so you've got a target to look at, and or friend or Angelina Jolie or Brad Pitt, it doesn't matter, your favorite pet, put it behind the lens so you've got a target to look at. That just helps you, remind you to look at the lens, not at the screen. Now, in the face-to-face with real people, real bodies in a room, eye contact is, of course, also important. And I would strongly suggest that we share our eye contact, and I'm deliberately looking away from the lens because I'm simulating being in a room, looking at people from left to right, front to back. Do not, whatever you do not look at the back of the room, staring at the top of the back of the room. That is very poor advice. I strongly recommend that you look at people, not the top of the room, or the side wall from one side, or the side wall on the other side, or imagine people naked. I've heard all sorts of weird and wonderful advice. Frankly, I think all of it is nonsense. We need to connect with people. So you look at somebody, you talk about a phrase or a small comment or a piece of information to one person, switch, come over to somebody else, switch, come over to somebody at the front, switch, come over to somebody at the back, switch, someone else, switch, someone else. It doesn't have to be for long, 1 or 2, 3 seconds per person, depending on the length of the thought or the sentence or the phrase that you're speaking. Sometimes they fall beautifully. Good morning, everybody, one phrase. Thank you for coming along, one phrase. It's nice to see you all, one phrase. That's 3 people in about 4 or 5 seconds. There's absolutely no reason why you can't connect with everybody in that room over the length of 20, 30 minutes. Also, don't do what I see some people talk about, is the most senior person in the room is perhaps on the left-hand side, the VP of sales, and the 2 colleagues next to him or her may also be very senior people. What you'll tend to do, if you think I need to look at them more because this is about our sales targets and our sales report, is look at them more than everybody else in the room. The feedback we've had from that is if your audience is in the room, they are all equally important. If you focus on the most important people in the room by virtue of their title, you will alienate the others. Now that may come back to bite you later on because they feel alienated. They may pose more difficult questions at the end. They may be more awkward because they feel like they haven't been included. Not necessarily, but it could. So why create that problem when you don't have to have it in the first place? Just be inclusive. Make sure you're speaking and have eye contact with everybody just for a short period of time. So, in essence, make sure when you look in the virtual space, look at the lens, make sure your framing is correct, make sure you are able to look at 80% of the time at the lens, sometimes down at the screen and or your keyboard. Have a target on the back of the camera to make sure you can see this is where I need to look. In the real face-to-face, bodies in a room perspective, share the information with everybody in the room. Don't stare at them, that feels awkward and uncomfortable, but equally, don't just skip over them because they feel like you don't want to look at them. All right, so that's been eyes. The next one we'll talk about what are we listening to and how are you being heard. Really important piece. Please join us for the next one. If you've got any comments on this particular video, please drop them in the comments below. I'm more than happy to talk about any comments at all. We are all in this community to learn a little bit more about better communication skills. So I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Take care and thank you for watching. Bye for now.